I never imagined that a single sentence could erase years of love. Not shouted. Not whispered. Just said, calmly. We only invited special people. The words came from my daughter-in-law, Lena, over the phone. Her voice was polite, almost bored, as if she were explaining a late delivery or a missed appointment. There was no hesitation. No apology. No awkward pause. Just that sentence. At first, I didn't understand what she meant. I was standing in my kitchen, the same kitchen where my son Marcus used to sit at the counter after school, swinging his legs, asking what was for dinner. The same kitchen where I had packed his lunches, paid his college fees, and later, signed checks I probably shouldn't have, but did anyway, because that's what mothers do. Special people? I repeated, confused. I was just asking about the wedding date. There was a brief silence. Then she said it. Oh. We already got married yesterday. Yesterday. I felt the room tilt slightly, like the floor had shifted under my feet. You got married? I asked. Yes, she replied. It was small. Very intimate. My heart thudded. Why didn't Marcus tell me? Another pause. This one felt deliberate. Well, she said, her tone cooling, we only invited special people. I waited for her to laugh. To say she was joking. To explain that of course I mattered. But she didn't. Instead, she added, anyway, I have to go. We're opening gifts. The call ended. I stood there for a long time, holding my phone like it might explain something if I stared hard enough. Marcus was my only child. I raised him alone after his father passed away when Marcus was 8. I worked 2 jobs, one during the day at a medical billing office, and another cleaning offices at night. I was tired most of my life, but I never let him feel it. When he graduated college, he struggled to find work. I paid his rent. When he moved in with Lena, I paid for their furniture, couch, bed, dining table. I told myself it was a housewarming gift. When their car broke down, I covered the repairs. When emergencies happened, and there were always emergencies, I was the first call. I never kept a spreadsheet. I never asked for receipts. I didn't need to. Love wasn't a transaction. Or so I thought. When Marcus told me he was planning to propose, I cried. I was happy for him. I asked if they needed help with the wedding. He smiled and said, "We're keeping it simple, Mom." I assumed that meant modest. Not secret. 2 days later, my sister called me. "Have you seen the pictures?" she asked carefully. "What pictures?" There was another pause. Heavy this time. The wedding photos. They're all over Facebook. My hand started shaking before I even opened the app. There they were. Marcus in a tailored suit. Lena in a white dress, smiling wide. A decorated hall. Flowers. A cake. Music. And people. So many people. Lena's parents. Her siblings. Her cousins. Friends. Family friends. People I didn't recognize, but clearly, they were special. I zoomed in on one photo after another, searching for myself like a missing person. I wasn't there. Not in the background. Not blurred. Not cropped out. I didn't exist. Someone had commented. Beautiful wedding. So happy the whole family could be there. The whole family. I closed the app and sat down. That was the moment something inside me finally went quiet. 3 days later, Marcus called. His voice was cheerful. Too cheerful. "Hey, Mom. How are you?" I didn't answer right away. He continued, "So, we're thinking about moving to a bigger place. Rent is kind of high, and..." I stopped him. "Marcus," I said slowly, "why wasn't I invited to your wedding?" Silence. Then he sighed. A long, practiced sigh. It wasn't personal, Mom. Then what was it? Well, we had to limit the guest list. I thought of the photos. The crowd. The laughter. I see, I said. He rushed on. You know we love you. But Lena felt it should just be special people. There it was again. That phrase. I let it settle between us. Then I said, calmly, I understand. He relaxed. I could hear it in his voice. Great. So about the rent. I can't help, I said. What? I said, I can't help. Only special people get help. The line went silent. Mom, come on. You don't mean that. I do, I replied, still calm. Congratulations on your marriage. And I hung up. That night, I changed my locks. The next day, I installed security cameras. Within a week, I received an email suggesting I might be confused and overwhelmed and should consider a medical evaluation, signed by a doctor I had never met. They thought I wouldn't notice. They were wrong. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. And this was only the beginning. The first message came the next morning. It wasn't angry. It wasn't desperate. It was sweet. Marcus. Hey, Mom. Just checking in. Hope you're feeling okay. I stared at the screen for a long moment before placing my phone face down on the table. For years, I had been the first person Marcus called when something went wrong. Now that I had finally said no, suddenly everyone was worried about how I was feeling. By noon, the messages had multiplied. Lena. We're concerned about you. Yesterday felt very out of character. Out of character. As if boundaries were a symptom. That afternoon, my doorbell rang. I didn't need to look through the camera to know who it was. Marcus stood on my porch, hands in his pockets, wearing the same jacket I had bought him 2 winters ago. Lena stood slightly behind him, arms crossed, her face carefully neutral. I didn't open the door. Instead, I spoke through the intercom. What do you want? Marcus flinched. Mom, come on. We just want to talk. You can talk from there. Lena leaned toward the camera. This isn't healthy. I almost laughed. Neither is pretending your mother doesn't exist, I replied calmly. Marcus raised his hands. We're not pretending. We just. You had a wedding, I said. With everyone there except me. Silence. Lena exhaled sharply. We didn't think you'd want to come. That was new. You didn't think, I corrected. You decided. Marcus's voice softened. We were hoping you'd help us with the new apartment deposit. Just until we get settled. There it was. The real reason for the visit. I shook my head. Only special people get help. Lena's face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. You're being petty, she said. No, I replied. I'm being consistent. I ended the call and walked away from the door. That night, my phone rang continuously. Family members. Old friends. Even my pastor. Marcus is worried about you, they said. They think you're acting differently. Have you been sleeping? Are you under stress? It was coordinated. Carefully worded concern wrapped around a quiet accusation, something must be wrong with her. I remembered a conversation from years earlier, when Marcus had joked, if you ever go crazy, I'll take care of you, Mom. I didn't laugh this time. 3 days later, a letter arrived by certified mail. Inside was a request for a capacity evaluation. They wanted a doctor to assess whether I was mentally fit to manage my finances. My hands were steady as I read it. This wasn't about love. This was about control. And money. They couldn't access my accounts anymore. They couldn't guilt me into checks. They couldn't casually borrow, without returning. So they tried another path. I made a call. Then another. By the end of the week, I had a lawyer, a financial advisor, and a therapist for myself, not because I was confused. The therapist listened quietly as I explained everything. When I finished, she said, "You're not grieving the wedding. You're grieving the illusion." She was right. The tone of the messages changed after my lawyer sent a response. Concern turned into frustration. "Marcus. Why are you doing this? We're your family." I didn't reply. "Lena. You're humiliating us. People are asking questions." Still, I stayed silent. Then came the last message of the night. "Marcus. If you don't help us, we'll have to consider our options." I read it once. Then I deleted it. That weekend, I took myself to a small cafe across town. I had passed it 100 times but never gone inside. I was always too busy being available. I ordered tea. Sat by the window. Watched people live their lives without knowing mine had cracked open. A woman at the next table smiled at me. "Beautiful day," she said. "Yes," I replied. And for the first time in weeks, I meant it. I realized something then. I didn't need to prove anything. Not my sanity. Not my generosity. Not my worth. The people who loved me wouldn't require evidence. 2 days later, my lawyer called. "They've requested emergency guardianship," she said. I closed my eyes. "How bad is it?" I asked. "It's weak," she replied. "But it's aggressive." Aggressive. That was the word. They hadn't invited me to their wedding, but they were willing to take away my independence. That night, I slept better than I had in days. Because clarity, even painful clarity, brings peace. And now, I knew exactly who they were. They expected tears. They expected panic. They expected me to fold. Instead, I organized my documents. I strengthened my boundaries. I started planning trips I had postponed for years. I began rebuilding my life quietly. Without them. And that terrified them more than anything. I never wanted a courtroom. I wanted a conversation. A moment of honesty. An apology that didn't come with conditions. Instead, I received a court date. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, thick and official. The return address belonged to the county courthouse. I knew what it was before I opened it. Emergency petition for temporary guardianship. Filed by Marcus, son. I sat down slowly, the paper trembling in my hands, not from fear, but from disbelief. Guardianship. The word echoed in my head like a gavel strike. It meant they were claiming I couldn't manage my own affairs. That I was incapable. That I needed someone else to decide for me. After decades of working, raising a child alone, paying my own bills, and helping others stand on their feet, they were saying I was no longer fit to stand on my own. I exhaled carefully. This wasn't about concern. This was retaliation. My lawyer was calm when I called her. "This is a common tactic," she said. "When money access disappears, control becomes the next move." Her voice was steady, professional. Mine was too. "What do we do?" I asked. "We respond with facts." So we did. Bank statements showing consistent management. Medical records showing no impairment. Witness statements from coworkers, neighbors, and friends. People who knew me, not the version of me Marcus and Lena were now trying to sell. I also prepared something else. A list. Every payment. Every transfer. Every emergency I had covered over the years. Not for revenge. For clarity. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Plain. Functional. No drama in the walls themselves. Marcus arrived early. He didn't look at me at first. Lena sat beside him, her posture rigid, a folder clutched tightly in her hands. They looked nervous. I felt steady. When Marcus finally glanced over, our eyes met for half a second. Then he looked away. Their attorney spoke first. He described me as a well-meaning but emotionally volatile older woman. He said I had recently become withdrawn and irrational. He mentioned my sudden refusal to help my son financially, framing it as evidence of instability. I listened quietly. Every word built on the same foundation. Then Lena took the stand. Her voice was soft, practiced. She seemed confused, she said. She started saying things that didn't sound like her. What kinds of things? The attorney asked. Lena hesitated. She kept repeating a phrase. Only special people. Over and over. A murmur moved through the room. The judge leaned forward slightly. Where did that phrase come from? He asked. Lena opened her mouth. Closed it. I don't know, she said. The judge turned to Marcus. Do you? Marcus swallowed. It was about the wedding. Silence. My lawyer stood. Your Honor, she said, may my client speak? The judge nodded. I stood slowly. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted every movement to be deliberate. I did not suddenly change, I said. I finally stopped pretending. I looked at Marcus. I was not invited to my own son's wedding, I continued. After years of supporting him financially. Marcus stared at the table. I turned back to the judge. When I asked why, I was told only special people were invited. The judge raised an eyebrow. And how did that make you feel? He asked. I paused. Clarified, I said. My lawyer presented the financial records. The room grew quiet as numbers filled the screen. Rent payments. Car repairs. Furniture purchases. Emergency transfers. Years of support. The judge studied them carefully. Then he asked Marcus one question. Were you financially dependent on your mother? Marcus hesitated. Yes, he said quietly. And when she stopped providing funds, you filed this petition? Marcus didn't answer. The judge didn't push. He didn't need to. After a short recess, the judge returned. This court finds no evidence of incapacity, he said. My heart didn't race. It rested. The petition is denied. Lena's shoulders sagged. Marcus closed his eyes. But the judge wasn't finished. I would caution the petitioners, he continued, against using legal tools as emotional leverage. Then he looked at me. You are free to manage your life as you see fit. Free. The words settled over me like a blessing. Marcus approached me in the hallway. Mom, he said, his voice cracking, we never wanted it to go this far. I looked at him. Neither did I replied. But you chose how far it went. Lena stood behind him, silent. I didn't wait for another explanation. Some conversations end without closure. And that's okay. As I stepped outside, the sun felt warmer than before. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Finished proving. Finished explaining. Finished sacrificing myself to stay included. That chapter had closed. And for the first time, I was excited about what came next. When everyone had an opinion, and I chose silence. The courthouse doors closed behind me with a soft click. No applause. No dramatic confrontation. Just the sound of something ending. I sat in my car for several minutes before starting the engine, letting the quiet settle. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Messages were already coming in. The story spread faster than the truth. By that evening, people knew. Not the full story. Not the careful details. Just fragments. She took her son to court. He tried to help her and she turned on him. She's become difficult. I didn't correct anyone. I had learned something important in the courtroom. The truth doesn't need a publicist. The first call came from my sister. "Why didn't you tell me it was this serious?" she asked. "I didn't want to involve you," I replied. There was a pause. Then she sighed. "They're saying you refused to help them out of spite." "I refused because I was excluded," I said calmly. Another pause. "That's not what they're telling people." "I know." Choosing who still had access. In the weeks that followed, I became very selective. Some people called out of genuine concern. Others called to gather information. I learned to tell the difference quickly. When conversations turned into interrogations, I ended them politely. "I'm doing well, thank you." That's been handled. I'm focusing on myself now. Those sentences became my shield. Not everyone liked it. But peace rarely asks permission. Marcus tried again. A month after the court hearing, Marcus called. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom," he said, quieter than before. "Can we talk?" "We are talking," I replied. He exhaled. Things got out of hand." "They didn't get out of hand," I said. "They followed the direction you pushed them." There was silence. "I want to fix this," he said. I leaned back in my chair. "What does fixing it look like to you?" He hesitated. "Starting fresh. Letting the past go." I closed my eyes briefly. "Does starting fresh include acknowledging what you did?" I asked. Another pause. "I don't want to rehash everything." That was my answer. "You want forgiveness without accountability," I said. "That's not starting fresh." The apology that wasn't. A few days later, I received an email. It was long. Carefully worded. Polite. Marcus apologized for how things were perceived. For unintended hurt. For stressful circumstances. He never apologized for the wedding. He never apologized for the guardianship petition. He never apologized for trying to take my independence. I read it twice. Then I archived it. Some apologies are written to end consequences, not to heal wounds. Losing people I didn't expect. Not everyone stayed. A friend I'd known for 20 years stopped calling. A cousin unfriended me on social media. At first, it stung. Then I realized something else. These were people who valued comfort over truth. Their loyalty had conditions. Mine no longer did. Building a different life. I started saying yes to things I had postponed for years. A weekend art class. A book club at the library. Morning walks in the park. Small things. But they added up. I met people who didn't know me as Marcus's mother. They knew me as myself. One woman in my book club laughed and said, "You have such a calm presence." I smiled. That calm had been earned. When Lena reached out. The message from Lena came unexpectedly. "I think we both said things we didn't mean. Maybe we can move forward." I stared at the words for a long time. Then I replied. "Moving forward requires honesty. I wish you well." That was it. No argument. No explanation. No reopening doors I had already closed. The moment of clarity. One afternoon, while cleaning out old files, I found a birthday card Marcus had written when he was 10. "Thank you for always being there, Mom. I hope I can take care of you one day." I sat with that card in my hands. Then I placed it back in the box. That version of Marcus had existed. And I had loved him fully. But love doesn't mean tolerating harm. Standing alone, and standing strong. I stopped waiting for people to understand. Understanding is a gift, not a requirement. What mattered was this. I was safe. I was independent. I was free. And for the first time in a very long time, I was living a life that wasn't shaped around someone else's needs. Looking ahead, I booked a trip. Just for myself. A place I'd always wanted to see but never felt justified going alone. As I packed, I realized something else. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a chapter written on my own terms. When my support disappeared, reality arrived at their door. Life has a way of revealing truths when safety nets are removed. For years, I had been the invisible cushion beneath my son's life. If something went wrong, I absorbed the impact. If a bill came due, I softened the fall. If a decision turned out poorly, I made it survivable. When I stepped back, there was nothing left to hide behind. The first cracks. I didn't hear about their troubles directly. News arrived through side channels, whispered phone calls, cautious texts from relatives who suddenly wanted to check in. "Are you and Marcus speaking again?" one aunt asked. "No," I replied. She hesitated. "They're struggling." I said nothing. Struggling was not an emergency. Struggling was life. The rent notice. 2 months after the court case, Marcus's landlord issued a warning. Late rent. Again. Without my help, their budget collapsed faster than I expected. Not because they were irresponsible, but because they had built a life assuming I would always be there. They hadn't planned for independence. I felt no satisfaction hearing this. Only clarity. When family meetings turned awkward. At a cousin's birthday dinner, I sensed the shift immediately. Conversations paused when I approached. Eyes flickered away. Someone finally asked, "How are Marcus and Lena doing?" I smiled politely. "I'm not sure. We're not in close contact." An uncomfortable silence followed. Then someone else said, "Marriage is hard." I nodded. It is. No accusations. No defense. Just truth. The call I didn't expect. One evening, Marcus called again. His voice sounded different. Not defensive. Not angry. Tired. "Mom," he said, "we're in trouble." I closed my eyes, listening. "We're behind on rent. The car needs repairs. Lena's hours were cut." I waited. He continued, "I know I don't have the right to ask, but, can you help us one last time?" I thought of the wedding photos. The courtroom. The word special. "Are you asking me because you respect me?" I asked, "or because you need me?" Silence. "I need you," he admitted. That answer mattered. "I won't help financially," I said gently. "But I can offer advice if you want it." He exhaled sharply. "Advice won't fix this." "No," I replied. "But it will help you build something that doesn't collapse when I'm gone." He didn't respond. When truth reached the wider family. Over time, details surfaced. Not from me, from inconsistencies. People noticed Lena's parents had been fully present at the wedding. They noticed my absence. They noticed how quickly the guardianship petition followed the money cutoff. Questions began circulating. Quietly. Without my involvement. I watched it unfold from a distance. Truth, I learned, moves slowly, but it moves. Letting go of the role I played. One afternoon, while sorting through old receipts, I stopped. Why was I still doing this? I shredded them. Not out of anger. Out of release. I was no longer the accountant of my son's life. I was just me. A new kind of joy. I went on my trip. Alone. I watched the sunrise over a place I had only seen in pictures before. I ate dinner by myself without rushing. I spoke to strangers who didn't know my past. One woman asked, "Who are you traveling with?" I smiled. Myself. She smiled back. Lucky woman. And for the first time, I believed it. When Marcus finally understood. Weeks later, a letter arrived. Handwritten. Short. It didn't ask for money. It didn't ask for forgiveness. It said, "I didn't realize how much you did for us until it was gone. I'm sorry I tried to take more instead of taking responsibility." I read it twice. Then I placed it in my drawer. Not as a trophy. As a marker. Growth had finally begun, even if it was late. Choosing what comes next. I didn't rush to respond. Some realizations need time to settle. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was protecting myself. And that, I finally understood, was not selfish. It was necessary. Peace earned. I sat on my balcony one evening, listening to the city settle. I thought about the woman I used to be, always available, always sacrificing, always afraid of being left out. She had done her best. But she didn't need to keep paying for love. Love, real love, doesn't send invoices. Moving forward. I don't know what my relationship with my son will look like in the future. I only know this. If it returns, it will be built on respect, not dependency. And if it doesn't, I will still be whole. Because I finally learned something I should have known long ago. Being someone's mother does not mean being their safety net forever. The last conversation that changed everything. Time passed quietly after Marcus's letter. No dramatic follow-ups. No late-night calls. Just space. And in that space, something unexpected happened. I healed. Learning to live without waiting. For the first time in years, my days were not shaped around anticipation. I no longer checked my phone every morning wondering if Marcus would need something. I no longer structured my finances around someone else's emergencies. I no longer rehearsed conversations in my head. Life felt lighter. Not perfect. But balanced. The invitation I didn't expect. 3 months after the letter, Marcus reached out again. Not by phone. By email. "If you're open to it, I'd like to talk." No expectations. No requests. I read the message carefully. Then I closed my laptop and went for a walk. By the time I returned, I knew my answer. Meeting on neutral ground. We met at a small cafe halfway between our neighborhoods. Public. Neutral. Safe. Marcus arrived early. He stood when he saw me. That alone told me something had changed. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You asked respectfully," I replied. "That matters." We sat. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he did. The words I had waited for. "I was wrong," Marcus said. Not misunderstood. Not pressured. Not confused. Wrong. I let him continue. "I thought love meant access," he said. "I thought because you were my mother, you'd always step in. I didn't realize how much I took." I didn't interrupt. "I let Lena handle things that should have been handled differently," he added. "And when you pulled away, I panicked. Because you were losing support," I said gently. He nodded. Yes. That honesty mattered more than any apology. Saying what I had never said before. When it was my turn, I spoke slowly. "I loved you by protecting you from consequences," I said. "But that didn't prepare you for adulthood." He looked down. "I know. I won't do that again," I continued. "Not because I don't love you, but because I do." Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable. Just real. Where Lena stood. Marcus cleared his throat. "Lena wants to apologize too," he said. "Eventually." I nodded. "When she's ready to take responsibility," I replied. "Not before." He accepted that. That, too, was new. Redefining the relationship. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were," Marcus said. "I just hope we can rebuild, slowly." I'm open to a relationship, I said. Not a rescue mission. He smiled faintly. That's fair. Walking away differently this time. When we stood to leave, Marcus hesitated. Can I hug you? He asked. I considered it. Then I nodded. The hug was brief. But genuine. And for the first time in a long while, it didn't cost me anything. Peace without conditions. After that meeting, there were no immediate changes. No family dinners. No holidays together. Just occasional messages. Respectful ones. And that was enough. I had learned something powerful. Reconciliation doesn't require closeness. It requires honesty. Who I am now. I still help people. But I choose when and how. I still love deeply. But I no longer disappear in the process. I no longer confuse guilt with responsibility. And I no longer accept being someone's last resort after being excluded. The quiet victory. One evening, as I watered my plants, I realized something. I hadn't thought about the wedding in weeks. Not with pain. Not with bitterness. Just as something that happened, not something that defined me. That was my victory. Looking forward, gently. I don't know how this story ends. Maybe Marcus and I will grow closer again. Maybe we won't. But either way, I am no longer afraid of the outcome. Because my life is full. And peaceful. And mine. When the truth finally spoke for itself. I didn't plan for the truth to come out. I didn't organize a meeting. I didn't send messages. I didn't correct anyone's version of events. I simply lived. And somehow, that did more than any explanation ever could. The family gathering I almost skipped. The invitation came from my niece. A family reunion. Nothing formal. Just food, conversation, and people who shared blood and history. For a moment, I considered declining. Not out of fear, but out of peace. Then I realized something. I was no longer avoiding anything. So I said yes. Walking in without armor. The gathering was held at a community hall. Folding tables, familiar faces, voices layered with laughter and old stories. When I walked in, conversations paused. Not dramatically. Just enough to notice. Some people smiled warmly. Others looked uncertain. A few looked guilty. Marcus and Lena were already there. Together. Quiet. Marcus met my eyes and nodded. I returned it. No tension. No performance. Just acknowledgement. When someone asked the question. It happened halfway through the meal. An older cousin, the kind who never learned subtlety, leaned back in his chair and said, loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. So, are things better now? The room stilled. I felt no rush of heat. No tightening in my chest. Just calm. Yes, I said. They are. He frowned. But what actually happened? People heard a lot of things. I looked around the table. Then at Marcus. Then back at the cousin. I was excluded from my son's wedding, I said evenly. After years of financial support. When I set boundaries, those boundaries weren't respected. So I enforced them. No accusations. No bitterness. Just facts. The silence that followed. No one interrupted. No one argued. A few people shifted in their seats. Someone murmured, I didn't know. Another said quietly, that's not what we were told. Marcus spoke then. I handled things badly, he said. I let money replace responsibility. And when it disappeared, I made it worse. All eyes turned to him. Lena remained silent. But she didn't object. That mattered. When perception changed. After that moment, something shifted. People stopped whispering. They started asking real questions, respectfully. Not why did you do this? But how are you now? I answered honestly. I'm well. And I was. The apology that finally landed. Later that afternoon, Lena approached me. Not dramatically. Not tearfully. Just, sincerely. I owe you an apology, she said. Not for how things felt, but for what I did. I studied her face. This time, there was no defensiveness. I excluded you, she continued. And when you reacted, I treated it like a problem instead of a consequence. I nodded. That's accurate, I said. She swallowed. I'm sorry. I didn't rush to forgive. I didn't reject it either. I appreciate the honesty, I replied. That was enough. Watching my son stand alone. Later, I watched Marcus speak with relatives. Not hiding behind me. Not redirecting blame. Not joking things away. Just owning his choices. I realized then that this was something I could never have given him. He had to reach it himself. The quiet respect that followed. As the gathering continued, something else happened. People treated me differently. Not with pity. With respect. They listened when I spoke. They asked my opinion. They didn't look at me like someone fragile. They saw me as someone who had stood her ground. And survived. Leaving without looking back. When it was time to leave, I hugged my niece. Goodbye. You handled that beautifully, she whispered. I didn't handle anything, I replied. I told the truth. Outside, the air was cool. I sat in my car for a moment before driving away, not to recover, but to reflect. I felt no need to replay conversations. No urge to analyze reactions. Everything that needed to be said had been. What I learned about dignity. Dignity isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand understanding. It simply exists, quietly, firmly, when you stop abandoning yourself. For years, I had mistaken endurance for strength. I was wrong. Strength is knowing when to stop carrying what was never yours. The last thing I let go of. That night, I deleted the last folder on my computer labeled Marcus, Expenses. It had been there for years. I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel loss. I felt closure. Standing fully in my life. As I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked lighter. Not younger. But freer. I smiled at myself. And for the first time in a very long time, the smile stayed. The life I built after I stopped explaining myself. After the family gathering, something settled permanently inside me. Not relief. Not pride. Acceptance. I no longer replayed conversations in my head. I no longer wondered who believed which version of events. The truth had been spoken, and more importantly, I had heard myself speak it without shaking. That mattered more than any reaction. When silence became comfortable. Weeks passed without drama. No surprise calls. No urgent messages. No indirect pressure. Marcus checked in occasionally. Short updates. Neutral tone. How are you? Hope you're doing well. I replied when I wanted to. Not because I had to. And that difference changed everything. A new circle, slowly formed. I didn't announce my freedom. I didn't declare a new chapter. I simply lived differently. I spent more time with people who didn't need me to fix anything. People who enjoyed my company without expecting solutions. A woman from my art class invited me for coffee. A neighbor asked if I wanted to join her walking group. Someone from the library book club suggested a weekend trip. These weren't deep friendships at first. But they were mutual. No imbalance. No dependence. Just presence. discovering who I was without obligation. One afternoon, while organizing my bookshelf, I realized something strange. So many of the books I owned were about parenting, sacrifice, responsibility. I pulled one out. Then another. I stacked them neatly and donated most of them the next day. In their place, I bought novels, travel memoirs, books about art and history. Not because I had changed, but because I was finally allowed to be curious again. Watching from a distance, I heard updates about Marcus through family. They were managing, struggling sometimes, learning. Lena returned to work full-time. Marcus picked up extra hours. No one said it outright, but everyone knew. They were standing on their own. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt something better. Peace. The moment I knew I had one. It happened on an ordinary day. I was sitting on my balcony, tea in hand, watching the city move below me. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Just wanted to say thanks, not for money, but for teaching me what responsibility actually looks like. I stared at the screen. Then I smiled. Because that was the lesson I had been trying to teach all along, unsuccessfully. Until I stopped trying. Redefining success. For a long time, I thought success as a mother meant. My child never struggles. My child never fails. My child never hurts. I was wrong. Real success meant this. My child learns to stand without standing on me. And I had finally allowed that. Living without fear of abandonment. One of the hardest things to admit was this. I had tolerated exclusion because I feared abandonment. I believed if I didn't give enough, sacrifice enough, prove enough, I would be left out. The wedding confirmed my deepest fear. And then, it freed me from it. Because once the worst happened, I survived. And I was still whole. When people started asking for advice, something unexpected happened. People began asking me for advice. Not about money. Not about family drama. About boundaries. How did you stay calm? How did you not react? How did you choose yourself without becoming bitter? I answered honestly. I stopped negotiating my worth. That was it. A life that felt spacious. My calendar no longer felt crowded. My finances felt stable. My home felt quiet in the best way. I rearranged furniture. Added plants. Hung artwork I loved but had once considered unnecessary. Nothing in my life screamed transformation. But everything whispered contentment. One last thought about forgiveness. Forgiveness came quietly. Not as an announcement. Not as a decision. Just as the absence of resentment. I didn't excuse what happened. I released the weight of carrying it. There's a difference. Standing fully in myself. Late one evening, as I prepared for bed, I paused in front of the mirror. I looked older than I once did. But also, stronger. My eyes no longer searched for approval. They recognized themselves. What I know now. If I could speak to the woman I was before all this, I would tell her one thing. Love doesn't require self-erasure. And respect doesn't come from sacrifice. It comes from boundaries. Moving toward the end, peacefully. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need validation. I didn't need anyone to lose for me to win. I had my life back. And that was enough. The day everything settled, and I finally felt free. The months after the family reunion passed quietly. No dramatic confrontations. No urgent messages demanding attention. No attempts to manipulate or guilt me. Instead, life settled, not because anyone apologized fully, not because everything was perfect, but because I finally stopped carrying what was never mine to bear. The unexpected calm. It started subtly. I noticed it first on a Thursday morning. The sun streamed through my living room window, painting patterns on the floor. My tea was steaming gently beside me, and the air smelled faintly of the lavender I had planted weeks before. I realized I wasn't thinking about Marcus or the wedding. Not even for a moment. I was thinking about myself. For years, I had believed that peace required other people's approval. That happiness was contingent on being needed. Now, I understood something radical. Peace doesn't depend on others. It comes from standing fully in yourself. Marcus reaches out, again. A few weeks later, Marcus called. Not desperate. Not angry. Not pleading. "Mom," he said softly, "I just wanted to tell you I'm proud of how you handled everything." I paused. "Proud?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. "I didn't understand before. I still have a lot to learn, but I'm trying." I smiled quietly, without saying more. This time, I didn't need him to mean it perfectly. I didn't need him to apologize for everything. I simply accepted the moment for what it was, a small gesture of acknowledgement. It was enough. Rebuilding my own life. Over the next few months, I began living deliberately. I traveled to places I had dreamed about for years. Solo trips became my sanctuary. I explored museums, cafes, and quiet parks, savoring moments that had been impossible when I was constantly bending for others. I joined local clubs, book clubs, walking groups, and even a painting class. People asked my opinion, not because they needed help, but because they valued it. That distinction changed everything. I also began volunteering. Not out of obligation, not to fill a void, but because I wanted to contribute without fear of being exploited. I helped in community gardens, taught literacy classes, and mentored young adults, small actions that made me feel useful, but free. The subtle shift in family dynamics. Months later, the extended family began noticing the change. Conversations shifted from gossip to respect. "What a calm presence she has now," one cousin whispered. "She's finally looking after herself," said another. Even Marcus and Lena adjusted. Their tone became more neutral when we spoke. They no longer assumed I would automatically solve their problems. They started learning accountability, slowly, imperfectly, but steadily. This shift wasn't about punishment. It wasn't revenge. It was simply the natural result of boundaries being respected. The final conversation. One late afternoon, I received a message from Marcus. "Can we talk one last time? I want closure, not for the past, but for the future." We met at a small park near my home. The trees swayed gently, and the sound of children laughing in the distance created an oddly comforting soundtrack. Marcus spoke first. "Mom, I wanted to say, thank you. For letting me face reality. For letting me fail and learn. For letting me see that the world doesn't revolve around me." I listened without interruption. Then I replied, "Marcus, I've always loved you. But love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. It doesn't mean erasing your boundaries. I hope you understand that now." He nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. "I do. I finally do." We didn't hug. We didn't promise anything. We simply acknowledged one another, honestly, calmly, and with respect. The moment of full realization. That evening, I returned home and sat on my balcony, watching the sunset. I reflected on everything that had happened. The wedding I wasn't invited to. The years of financial support. The guardianship petition. The court battle. The months of tension and estrangement. And I realized something incredible: I had survived it all. Not only survived, but I had grown stronger, wiser, and more at peace. I was no longer defined by what others did or didn't do. I was defined by how I stood. Reclaiming joy. I started pursuing hobbies I had abandoned. I painted, traveled, and wrote reflections in a journal. I reconnected with old friends who had quietly supported me over the years. I formed bonds with new people who respected me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. For the first time in decades, my life felt spacious. Not empty. Not lonely. But fully mine. The transformation that wasn't dramatic. No one noticed me suddenly change. There were no fireworks. No grand announcements. The transformation was quiet. Almost invisible. But it was deep. Permanent. I no longer needed validation. I no longer needed to justify myself. I no longer needed to negotiate my worth. And that freedom was priceless. When I looked back. Sometimes, when I think of Marcus and the past, I feel a pang of sadness. Not anger. Not resentment. Sadness for the lessons he had to learn the hard way. Sadness for the years I spent carrying what wasn't mine. But then I remind myself, everything that happened taught me boundaries, dignity, and self-respect. Everything prepared me for the life I now live. I wouldn't trade it. The last lesson. The most important lesson I learned. Love and sacrifice are not the same. Love does not demand erasure of self. Love does not require submission to someone else's will. Love flourishes only when respect and boundaries exist. And now, I finally live that truth every day. Standing in full light. The final evening came quietly, as all endings do. I sat in my favorite chair with tea in hand, looking out at the city lights. I thought of the woman I was before all of this, the woman who gave endlessly, feared exclusion, and doubted herself constantly. And I smiled. She survived. She learned. She became whole. And now, she lived fully. The ending that lasts. I didn't need a dramatic finale. I didn't need Marcus to apologize perfectly. I didn't need anyone to acknowledge me publicly. I needed peace. And peace had come. The story didn't end with revenge, anger, or bitterness. It ended with me, fully present, fully respected, fully free. I survived their absence, their exclusion, and their mistakes, and in doing so, I finally found myself. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below. For more powerful, emotional stories like this, like and subscribe to my channel.